I was cutting into a piece of dry turkey when my cousin laughed and said, "Well, not everyone here can afford a real career." My uncle chimed in with a smirk. "You know, maybe you should date someone rich, just to even the family out." They all chuckled. Even my own mother looked away. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any insult. For 10 minutes, I sat there, heart thudding, mouth shut, because poor people are taught not to make scenes. But then my phone rang. I let it ring once, twice. Then I put it on speaker. And when my assistant's voice said, "Ma'am, the Tokyo investors approved the final transfer. Your personal account's been credited," the laughter stopped. Forks froze midair. And just like that, the version of me they thought they knew collapsed. But what hurt the most wasn't their mockery. It was realizing how long I let them believe I needed their approval. Let me tell you how I got here. I'm Nora Klein. And for most of my life, I stayed quiet, thinking it would earn me peace. But silence doesn't protect you. It just makes people comfortable hurting you. If you've ever been underestimated, called a burden, or made to feel small for dreaming big, this story is for you. I was halfway through coding a new update for the Swift Roots backend when the call came through. "Mom," read the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. It wasn't often she called, not unless she needed something or someone to fill an empty chair. Her voice was all sugar, but I knew better. "Sweetheart, we're having the whole family over for the 4th. It won't be the same without you. Everyone's coming. We just need our Nora to make it complete." Just need our Nora, like I was some misplaced napkin at a dinner party. I agreed without saying much. I'd be there. She didn't need to know what that meant. 8 years ago, I stood in front of my family in this very house, trying to explain how a faulty security update had led to the collapse of my first tech startup. I was 28 and naive enough to believe that the truth mattered more than perception. I was wrong. They didn't yell. They didn't ask questions. They just deleted me, quietly. My name was taken off family trusts. Invitations dried up, and group photos stopped including me. At one point, Mom told me, "We don't do disgrace, Nora. Not in this family." I never told them I used the last of my savings to rent a drafty attic apartment in Haverford, that I freelanced until midnight, building logistics code for local delivery drivers while eating frozen ramen for weeks. They never asked. What they never saw was the slow, quiet building of Swift Roots. What started as a one-woman operation to streamline route management for independent couriers eventually turned into a full-scale logistics API. If you ordered flowers, groceries, or even urgent medication in this state in the last 3 years, chances are it traveled through my system. But I never put my name in headlines. I didn't need them knowing. Not yet. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind with yelling or lawsuits. I just wanted to see what they would do when faced with the very thing they had thrown away. I wanted to know, if they met me again without knowing who I was, would they treat me any differently? I'd find out soon enough. I packed a modest weekend bag and looked around my apartment. It was still small, still simple, but everything in it was mine, paid for in full, earned in silence. And so I left, not as a prodigal daughter returning home, but as a ghost in their memory. The Nora they thought had disappeared. The Nora they believed never amounted to much. I would walk back into their world exactly the way they imagined me. Invisible, unimportant, irrelevant. Let's see what they do with that. The Klein house hadn't changed. Still marble floors and chandeliers, all too bright, too polished, like they were trying too hard to say something about permanence and success. I parked my car a block away and walked up the driveway alone. No driver, no partner in tow. Just me, in a navy blouse and flat shoes, holding a bottle of Pinot I knew no one would drink. The front door opened before I knocked. It was Max, my cousin, forever smug. He did a quick scan, head to toe, then said with a grin, "Still living in that attic in Haverford?" I smiled politely. "Still married to yourself, Max?" Inside, the air was warm with expensive cologne and the scent of lamb roast. Everyone looked like they'd been curated by a lifestyle magazine. Pearls, cufflinks, Botox smiles. I, by comparison, looked like the help. They noticed. My mother greeted me with an air kiss. "Darling, you look comfortable." She took the wine and passed it off without reading the label. "So, what's work like these days? We never hear updates." "Quiet," I said, and that was true in all the ways that mattered. "I heard," said Aunt Elise from across the room, "you're taking a sabbatical? Must be nice to have the time." I sipped my water and watched them. They were using the silver cutlery I had bought for Mom's 50th, back when I still had the startup money and thought gifts meant love. Now, she told guests it was Klein family silverware. From Europe. They spent 20 minutes gushing over Raina, my younger sister, who now worked with some NGO overseas. "She's making real change," someone said loudly enough for me to hear. Then came the first crack. Clara, Max's girlfriend, sweet, oblivious, leaned over from her seat. "Nora, you'd know this. My company just started using a service called Swift Routes. Total game changer. Whoever built it, honestly? Genius. I heard it was a woman, too." I felt something flicker behind my eyes, but I kept my face neutral. Just a small smile, the kind that slips out when no one's watching. Mom cleared her throat, changing the subject. "You know, some people think they're on top of the world, and then life humbles them. Right back to where they started." Her voice was soft. Her aim was not. I didn't speak. But I looked at her. Really looked. And she looked away. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. They thought they'd won something just by surviving me. What they didn't know was that the next course wouldn't be lamb, it would be truth. And it was already cooking. The conversation around the table had shifted from veiled insults to full-blown financial peacocking. Investment portfolios, real estate flips, IPO predictions. Everyone was out to prove they were winning. Max was in the middle of bragging about some shaky crypto venture when my phone rang. I picked it up and, with deliberate calm, said, "Excuse me," before placing it on the table and putting it on speaker. "Hi, Nora." June's voice was clear and crisp. "Just confirming tomorrow morning's meeting with Amazon Logistics. The $80 million deal is locked in. Legals sent over the updated contract draft for your review. Also, the tech teams flagged a minor security patch for the Swift routing algorithm. They want your final sign-off before pushing it live." Silence. It was stunning, as if someone had thrown a switch and all the noise died in a vacuum. Clara blinked at me, mouth slightly open. "Wait, Nora, you're the founder of Swift Routes?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked around at the table. Max was frozen mid-sip. My mother's hand tightened around her wine glass. The uncle who mocked my long vacation earlier was now pretending to study the floral arrangement. I turned to Clara. "You said your company uses the system, didn't you? Works well?" She nodded, stunned. "Better than any of the bigger guys. It's brilliant." Max laughed nervously. "Well, look at that. Little cousin Nora, holding out on us." My mother finally spoke, her voice thinner than I remembered. "Why wouldn't you tell the family? Something this big. We could have supported you." I tilted my head, slowly, like I was trying to remember something. When everything collapsed, my first company, no one asked if I was okay. You all just walked away. The words weren't bitter, just factual. But they landed like a stone in a still pond. I stood up, brushing invisible lint off my sleeve. I'm not saying this to gloat. I just want to make something very clear. What you see isn't all I am. And from now on, I'd appreciate it if my silence wasn't mistaken for failure. There were no replies, no excuses, just stunned faces and the faint clink of someone nervously placing a fork down. I turned and walked out, head high. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't on my shoulders. It was in their throats. Behind me, I felt a gaze linger. Maximum, not with judgment, but calculation. A week after the dinner, my inbox lit up with an invitation from Max. Lunch. His tone was unusually courteous, the kind of performative respect I'd seen corporate execs use when they wanted something, but hadn't figured out how to ask for it yet. We met at a trendy new spot downtown, where the appetizers cost more than my monthly rent used to. Max arrived in a navy blazer and confidence, pulling my chair out like he was auditioning for charm school. I have to say, he started, you really surprised me. In a good way. You've built something remarkable, Nora. Really. I waited. People like Max always wrapped their offers in compliments. It was only a matter of time before the invoice showed up. I figured, he continued, you might need someone to help manage expansion on the East Coast. I've got solid contacts. Banks, a few press channels. I know the territory. You'd be unstoppable with the right partnerships. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a strategic collaboration draft. He was proposing 30% ownership of any Eastern division in exchange for PR, media access, and bank facilitation. I flipped through it once, didn't even read the fine print. Then I asked, evenly, what do you know about dynamic route optimization using API layers across decentralized courier hubs? He blinked. Well, that's your wheelhouse, obviously. I'm more of a macro guy. Right. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. Look, I'm just trying to help here. Let's not make it messy. The Klein name still means something in this town. People might talk if they think you're pushing the family away. There it was. The sugar-dipped threat. Max always had a gift for making manipulation sound like concern. I picked up the folder, closed it, and gently slid it back toward him. I've lived long enough to tell the difference between someone trying to help and someone just trying to carve a piece out of a pie they didn't bake. His mouth twitched, half smile faltering. And Max, I added, standing up, next time you bring a proposal to the table, at least understand the menu. I left before dessert was served. It was a Tuesday morning when my assistant buzzed in. Your mother's here. Says she doesn't have an appointment but insists it's important. I looked up from my desk, already knowing this wasn't a social visit. I told June to send her in. My mother walked in with a grace that had always bordered on performance. Tailored cream coat, matching brooch, and that air of moral superiority she wore like perfume. She scanned my office, sleek, quiet, efficient, with a restrained nod of approval, then smiled. I thought it was time I saw where you work, she said as she sat, placing a leather-bound folder on my desk. You've built something, and I think it's time we built something together. She opened the folder with a flourish. Inside were documents outlining a proposal for a charitable foundation, the Klein Legacy Initiative. A series of high-profile philanthropic ventures, food banks, scholarships, clean energy, all noble on the surface. But the kicker was this. The board would be made up entirely of established family figures, and I would be listed as executive director, the face, the operator, not the owner. You've always been brilliant, she said, smoothing the corner of the page. But imagine what you could do with the family name behind you. Nora, Klein blood commands respect. I kept my expression neutral. I've never needed anyone to fear me, just to trust the package shows up on time. She blinked, thrown for half a second. I stood, gesturing toward the hallway. Let me show you something. We passed the tech bullpen where maps, schedules, and live routing algorithms flickered on whiteboards and monitors. The hum of ideas. Real movement. No marble, no oil paintings of dead men in waistcoats. Just work. These people, I said quietly, don't care about my last name. They care that their systems don't crash, that their customers get bread delivered before noon. Back at the office door, she handed me a folded piece of paper. If you continue to distance yourself, she said softly, I won't be able to protect you from what the family may start to say. She left with her spine perfectly straight. Later, I opened the letter. One line stuck out like a knife between ribs. Even if I don't agree with what they say about you, I may not be able to stop it. They weren't coming to understand me. They were preparing to attack. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived with the embossed crest of Klein and Partners, the family law firm. Once the pride of our clan, now just a crumbling edifice with unpaid rent and half its partners gone. Inside was a formal letter from Uncle Raymond. It was polite, even affectionate. He congratulated me on swift roots, then got to the point. The firm was failing. A takeover was imminent. And if I didn't act fast, outsiders would claim what had been ours for generations. He proposed that I purchase it, quietly, to preserve the honor of the Klein name. He offered me no seat at the table, no recognition, no ownership in name, just a check. He wanted me to pay to keep their dignity intact. If I agreed, I would be a benefactor, but never acknowledged. A silent vault to deposit their shame and withdraw a legacy. I thought about it for 5 seconds. Then I opened my laptop, drafted an email, and attached a photo. The image was a plaque outside Franklin Law School's newly built scholarship wing. It read, "The Swift Future Fund, in honor of persistence over pedigree." Below it was a list of 5 students from underrepresented backgrounds who'd just received full tuition. I typed, "Dear Uncle Raymond, I've already chosen where to invest my ethics." And it's not in institutions that once erased me from their letterhead. I hit send. Within 24 hours, a screenshot of my reply had surfaced in the family group chat, a cesspool of passive-aggressive emojis and curated family updates. One cousin called me a traitor to her bloodline. Someone else said I was biting the hand that raised me. I didn't reply. I just updated the Swift Routes code deployment system. Every package still arrived on time. The ping came in during a strategy call. June's voice crackled through my headset, low but urgent. "Nora, I think you need to see this." She forwarded the link. A thread on a well-known tech forum had just surfaced, claiming to contain fragments of Swift Routes' core routing algorithm. The code was legit, partially obfuscated but clearly from an early version. By the end of the hour, it had been reposted across half a dozen Reddit subforums, with amateur developers picking it apart line by line. The ripple was instant. Investors began asking questions. Internal chatter spilled into emails. A few distribution partners quietly paused new contracts. One minor publication even speculated we'd plagiarized from an older routing system. Laughable, but in a digital storm, even a whisper becomes thunder. And then, Clara's name came up. She had had temporary back-end access during a performance audit last quarter. It was routine, approved, logged. But people didn't care about process. They cared about proximity. And Clara, bright and optimistic, also happened to be Max's ex. The connection was flimsy, but the board didn't need proof. They needed a gesture. In an emergency meeting, one of the advisors, a man who hadn't even known my name 6 months ago, offered his suggestion with a polished smile. Perhaps for stability, the CEO could step aside temporarily, just while we investigate. It was an ambush, dressed as concern. I looked around the room. Half of them couldn't meet my eyes. The others tried to, but with that hollow gaze that says, "This is for your own good." And just like 8 years ago, I was being asked to disappear for their comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't protest. I simply nodded. I understand. Then I excused myself and walked straight to my office where June was already waiting. "Open the dev archive," I said quietly, handing her a secure flash drive. "Full trace logs, access records, traffic redirection. Find where it leaked from. I don't want you to release it yet. Just watch. Track." She looked confused. "We're not going public?" I shook my head. "Not yet." Then I paused, my voice lower. "They're not used to someone who acts after they've already been doubted. Let's show them what that looks like." By Friday, Swift Roots was a battlefield. Tech media had seized on the story. Headlines screamed about security breaches, flawed architecture, and speculation about corporate sabotage. Clients flooded the support lines. Internally, morale splintered. The whispers were loud enough to drown out the facts. Clara took a leave of absence, voluntary technically, but when half the board is raising eyebrows every time you walk in, absence becomes survival. I said nothing. No press release, no online statement, but June and I never stopped watching. Late one night, over a tray of vending machine coffee and server logs, she found it. A username tied to an old internal Git repository, Trainolds87, Trevor Reynolds. He had been one of our first engineers, brilliant, entitled, and ultimately fired for breaching courier privacy protocols. I'd buried the details at the time to protect the company's image, gave him a clean exit, even a recommendation. He had kept a beta build from his time on the development team. It wasn't theft in the traditional sense. It was spite disguised as opportunity. I looked at the report June compiled and closed my laptop. Then I did the unexpected. I didn't press charges. Instead, I released 15% of Swift Roots' core routing engine code, open source, public, with a statement on GitHub. Swift Roots was born from a desire to make logistics invisible and trustworthy. If trust requires transparency, then I choose transparency. Here's a piece of what we've built. Make it better. The tech world exploded. Developers, many from competing startups, swarmed the repo. Within hours, comments poured in. Bug fixes, performance tweaks, architecture suggestions. A former critic published a Medium post titled, "The CEO Who Blinked," and reset the standard. It didn't fix everything, but it changed everything. By Monday, 3 investors who had hesitated sent emails of support. One major client reinstated their contract. More importantly, our team, rattled but loyal, felt seen. Not defended, but led. That night, Clara walked into my office. Her eyes were glassy. She held her phone, still lit with the message I had sent her an hour before. "I believe in you, because once, I needed someone to believe in me, and no one did." She didn't say anything, just nodded, just stayed. The storm had passed, but it left a silence behind that buzzed louder than noise. The kind of hush that fills a place after everything has been shaken. And now, people walk slower, speak softer, as if not to disturb the fragile balance just regained. At Swift Roots, the servers still blinked, orders still routed, and trucks still moved. But something in the air felt heavier. Nora stood alone in the hallway leading to the engineering wing. For a while, she didn't go in. She just listened. Quiet clicks of keyboards, a hum of conversation, the unmistakable rhythm of something real being rebuilt from strain. She stepped inside. Clara was wiping down the whiteboard. Rows of scribbles, flow charts, and half-erased ideas layered over each other like stories trying to be told. Her eyes were tired but calm, her body smaller than usual beneath her oversized hoodie. Nora stayed silent until Clara noticed her. Clara offered a small smile. "I've been thinking," she said. "What if we took a part of Swift Roots, the core tech, the routing engine, and created something parallel? Nonprofit. No clients, just community. Call it Open Roots." Nora raised an eyebrow. "Run deliveries for rural nonprofits, local libraries, community pantries? Give micro-businesses in forgotten towns a platform to operate like the big guys. No investor ROI, just actual return to the people." Nora didn't answer immediately. Clara continued, voice more resolute now. "I'll lead it. No salary, at least for 6 months. I know how it looks. But this isn't to repay you or prove myself. It's because I believe we can remind people that tech isn't only for scale or speed. It can be for kindness too." Nora felt something shift. Not in Clara, in herself. The last time she had trusted someone so fully, it had cost her everything. 8 years of being erased, judged, silenced. But now, as she looked at Clara, she didn't see risk. She saw someone standing at the same edge she once did, except this time, she wasn't standing there alone. "Do it," Nora said softly. "No pitch deck, no budget forecast. Just do it. And do it like it means something." The next morning, she didn't expect to wake up to a headline. Forbes exclusive. Swift Routes launches. Open Routes, a tech CEO's bold move to pair profit with purpose. Attached was a sub-headline that read, "From being called a silent founder to shaping a louder future." Nora stared at the screen, blinking. Later that day, an email arrived from Amazon Logistics. "We'd like to shift from investment to partnership," it read. "Innovation with intention is something we'd like to be a part of." Nora didn't smile, but she felt something more powerful, a quiet, anchoring peace. The day was ordinary in every sense. Sunlight spilling across the floor of her office, a half-eaten granola bar on her desk, and a proposal on her screen for a young female founder launching a rideshare app in remote Alaska. Then her phone rang. It was her mother. The voice on the other end was softer than she remembered. Tentative. "Nora," she said, almost like testing the name. Would you come for dinner sometime this week? The family wants to talk. Really talk." There was no pretense this time, no rehearsed superiority, just a fragile sentence from a woman who once carved silence into a weapon. Nora didn't answer right away. She looked through the glass wall into the main workspace, where the new Open Routes team was in full brainstorm mode. June was helping 2 interns with budget logistics, while Clara was enthusiastically reviewing UI designs made for older adults with limited tech skills. The room felt alive, earnest, home, a different kind of family. She thought about how many times she had longed for her mother's acknowledgement, for the feeling of being invited instead of ignored. Now that the invitation came, it no longer held the weight it once did. Later that evening, she returned the call. Her voice was calm. "I appreciate the invitation, I do, but I'm deep into a long-term initiative right now. If there's something important, maybe you could write it in a letter. I'll read it. But I won't come back to a table where I was once unheard, just to relive the silence. No anger, just truth, shaped by time and boundary." A few days later, in a modest but crowded room at the back of a university business incubator, June presented the first draft of Mentor Bridge, a platform connecting minority tech students in underfunded schools with veteran mentors. Nora didn't lead the meeting. She didn't speak first or last. She sat at the far end of the table taking notes, listening. There, in that quiet corner, she realized something. "I never needed applause," she thought. "What I needed, and what I can give now, is the chance for someone else to not be written off just because they dared to be silent." Not every redemption needed noise. Some arrived in the shape of a steady hand, extended, not for credit, but to make sure no one else falls through the cracks where she once disappeared. A year had passed, and with it, the chaos and firestorms that once defined Nora's days had given way to something quieter, more deliberate. Her inbox still buzzed, her days were still long, but her mind felt lighter. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. That morning, she stood outside the stone arch of her old university, the one where her journey had first derailed. The campus buzzed with life, students in hoodies rushing to class, coffee carts wafting steam into the cold air, the air full of casual brilliance. Nora hadn't set foot here in nearly 9 years, not since her first startup crashed, and the school's administration revoked her scholarship and suspended her, without appeal or conversation. Back then, she had left with a cardboard box and a digital void where her dreams used to live. Now, she was back. But not as an alumna, not even by name, just as an unnamed guest of honor for a scholarship fund created by an anonymous donor. A program called First Fall, designed for student entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds. The very kind of student she once had been. When her name was announced, it wasn't her full name, just a former student who walked a longer path. She stepped onto the stage in the same auditorium where she once sat in the very back row, trying to disappear. She faced the audience. Rows of young faces looked up at her with a kind of hope she had once forgotten how to carry. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she remembered that day. The cold metal of the dorm hallway chair beneath her legs, the glow of the suspension email burning through her retinas, her future evaporating one sentence at a time. She hadn't cried then. She hadn't even gotten angry. Just empty. Like a name erased from a page without even the courtesy of ink. Now, she took a breath and leaned toward the microphone. "I'm not here to reclaim a dream," she said. "When a dream is taken from you, sometimes you don't fight to get it back. You build something else. A place. A door. A table where the next dream can sit." She stepped down without applause. Outside, as she passed through the quad, a student jogged up beside her. A second-year girl with thick glasses and paint-stained jeans. "Excuse me," she said, breathless. "Were you the one who made First Fall happen?" Nora didn't pause. She just smiled, gently. "No," she said. "That was someone who once got told she didn't belong. She just decided not to let silence be the last word." The invitation came in a plain envelope. No letterhead, no big logo. Just a message. "We'd be honored if you'd speak at our senior assembly. You were one of our brightest." It was signed by the principal of her old high school in Philadelphia. She stared at it for days before saying yes. Now, a week later, she pulled up to the curb of a neighborhood that had once been home. The buildings hadn't changed much, though everything looked smaller now. She parked a block away from the old watch shop her father used to run. Long closed, long forgotten. The awning was gone, replaced by a vape store. But she still remembered the smell of machine oil, the ticking of old clocks waiting for his steady hands. Nora stepped out and stood on the sidewalk, letting the city noise fill the space where old memories used to shout. There was no sadness, just peace. She walked into the school with her coat folded neatly over her arm. The auditorium hadn't changed. The same creaky seats, the same flickering exit sign above the double doors. She stood backstage and remembered the day she'd received a certificate for academic excellence, right here. The applause. And then, weeks later, the silence. The calls that stopped. The file that got quietly updated, removing her from any alumni mentions. When it was her turn, she walked to the podium, looking not at the staff, but at the sea of young faces below. "I'm not here to talk about what I've built," she began. "That's not the part of the story that matters. What matters is that when I was your age, I thought the worst thing in the world was to disappoint people, to be seen as someone who let others down." She paused. "But I did fail. Spectacularly. I lost funding. I got kicked out of school. My family stopped answering my calls. I lived in a studio apartment with a broken heater and rewrote code every night for 3 years until I could try again." Then, her voice softened. "Success is not a standing ovation. It's not the moment others applaud you. It's the moment you stop needing them to." Afterward, the students trickled out slowly. Some waved, some nodded. Then a boy, maybe 16, walked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Nora, did you ever feel like no one needed you, even when you tried so hard?" Her chest tightened. She bent down, looked him in the eye, and rested a hand on his shoulder. "Yes," she said. "But you just asked me that question. That means you've already started needing you, and that's where everything changes." She watched him walk away, shoulders still hunched, but a little straighter than before. That night, Nora sat on the train heading home, the city lights flickering past. She didn't feel like a guest or an outcast anymore. She felt like someone who had walked through the fire and come out not looking to be welcomed back, but to welcome others forward. And that, she thought, is all the homecoming she would ever need. 1 year later, Mentor Bridge had become something no one had quite predicted. Not just a program, not just a platform, but a quiet revolution. It was now a national initiative, chosen as the primary bridge between underrepresented students and startup mentors across the country. Women returning to the workforce, rural youth, and first-gen immigrants now had something they hadn't before: access. The launch ceremony was being held at Capitol Hill. Senators, journalists, speeches, applause, and yet, one name was absent from the guest list. Nora wasn't there. She was in Nevada, kneeling on dusty earth beneath a tent flap flapping in the summer breeze. The desert sky stretched open above a camp tucked in the corner of a state map, the kind of place no one built legacies in, unless you were building people. 50 kids, most of them first-time coders. Most of them from neighborhoods that didn't have tech meetups or robotics clubs or even stable Wi-Fi. But today, they had something better. Someone who believed they deserved to write their own language into the world. Nora sat cross-legged beside Clara and June, huddled in a circle of students staring wide-eyed at their screens. "We're going to write our very first line of code today," Clara announced, smiling. "Just 2 words. Hello, future." Laughter, nervous shuffles. Nora guided one small hand to a keyboard, helping a girl with a curly ponytail and a shy demeanor type each letter, one key at a time. "Like this?" the girl asked. "Exactly like that," Nora said. "The future always starts slow." As the sun lowered, painting the sky in desert gold, the laughter turned into focus. Little faces lit by blue screen glow, fingers tapping, syntax errors and triumphs. Somewhere in the background, a dusty speaker played soft Latin pop. Later, while gathering wires and notebooks, a young girl, maybe 10, maybe younger, walked over and tugged at Nora's shirt. Her name tag read, Lucia. She looked up, eyes serious, and asked, "Miss, who are you if nobody knows your name?" Nora blinked, caught off guard by the question's weight. She let out a soft laugh and lowered herself until they were face to face. "I'm someone who used to be told she was nobody," she said. "So now I help people like you figure out who you are, before anyone else tries to tell you otherwise." Lucia nodded slowly, as if saving the answer somewhere deep and safe. When the session ended, the kids ran through the field, chasing each other with string-powered paper drones built from code blocks and cardboard. Nora stood in the center of the noise, watching, wind in her hair, silence in her soul. She had never felt smaller or more infinite. Back in New York, Across time zones and atmospheres, the Mentor Bridge headquarters hummed with quiet efficiency. On the admin dashboard, a new update pinged. Welcome new mentor, Nora Klein. Role, observer. No title, no job description, just a presence. She was no longer the CEO, no longer the failed daughter, no longer the misunderstood genius clawing her way back. She was a witness, a guide, someone who stepped aside so the next could step forward. And somewhere between the laughter of children and the echo of forgotten names, Nora understood. Home wasn't a place or a family or a legacy etched into granite. It was a question answered not with applause, but with quiet footsteps, leading others beyond where you stopped. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over noise, truth over applause. The hardest battles are the ones no one sees, and the strongest people are often the quietest in the room. But in the end, dignity speaks louder than revenge. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories that speak to the soul.